Hello, I'm Namisile Pamela Ngubane, and this is the Entity Dynamics podcast. Today's episode is going to be more of an unscripted monologue / rant about the term Bantu. So I am just gonna get right into it. I got a comment on one of my videos. I think it was the one where I was talking about how Ubuntu could be the basis of the development of a national culture. So the comment said that the term Bantu was a term created by white supremacists to degrade us, to basically define us in a degrading term. Now, I decided, okay, let me check this out, because I knew that this wasn't true, but I just wanted to get some backup information. So I went to sahistory.org.za and I, checked this out there, and it pointed out that initially the term Bantu was coined, so to speak, by the European anthropologists who had come to sub-Saharan Africa, and they used the term to define a particular people group. So, I assume what happened, is that they said to the people they were talking to, who are you? What do you call yourselves? And they probably said Singabantu, which is in Zulu to say we are people. Because that's what Ubuntu is. Ubuntu is a person. And that's why Ubuntu as a philosophy is usually defined as a humanist philosophy, because it's all about human to human interactions and what human beings should be doing in order to contribute the most good to the world and to be the best that they can be, because their behavior affects the other individuals in the society and thus society as a whole. So I think that's where this word comes from. That's why they use the term Abantu or the Bantu people, because the word Bantu and Umuntu and Ubuntu was so integral to the nature of the culture of these people, and they also obviously could see that these are a particular type of people from sub-Saharan Africa, different from the other peoples of sub-Saharan Africa. And then they also identified within the Bantu people the different subgroups, like the Nguni people, the Sotho-Tswana people, the Venda people, the Tsonga people. There's also the Shona people, right? And, this was anthropologists. They were studying people. That's what they do. They study people. And that they have to demarcate people groups in order to know who they're talking about, and so they use this term Bantu to describe these particular people. So from that article from sahistory.org, it was very clear that the term Bantu was never designed to be derogatory or undermining the humanity of the people that it was referring to. It was just there to specify that this is what we're talking about. It's like, you can't say clouds. Oh, there's clouds in the sky. You have to say what kind of clouds they are, because the type of clouds they are will determine the sort of weather you can expect from them, or the sort of precipitation you can expect from them. So if you have cumulonimbus clouds, you'll expect some sort of precipitation. If you have cirrus clouds, you'll expect something else. Cumulus, something else. Stratus, something else. Cumulostratus, something else. You know what I'm saying? Nimbostratus, whatever, So it's the same thing. It's different types of people being defined. It wasn't a racist term, And so the article then does say that at some point, the Black consciousness movement, along with the communists, said, or the critical theorists, which are the same thing as communists, said no, this was used to define people as a way of differentiating them or othering them. We all other. We have to other, because we're not all the same. If you don't other, then you can't specify. It's not inherently negative to other. Yes, you can other negatively, you can stereotype negatively, that's for sure. But stereotyping and generalizing are not the same thing. And if you're going to do sociology, you have to generalize, because you have to look at cultural trends and norms. And the only way you can discuss them is to generalize. And you can't generalize willy-nilly. You generalize based on trends that are sweeping throughout the civilization or the society, or are being practiced throughout the civilization or society. So the article does go on to say that, yes, it was then seen as derogatory, and then people said, no, rather we should use terms like African or Black. And that doesn't help you if you're an anthropologist. And that's a fact. You're not going to say Black people of sub-Saharan Africa did this. Which ones? Because there's also the Khoi and the San people here. And then if you want to get all even broader about the term Black, then you're also including the Southeast Asians who were brought here and whose descendants are still here from Southeast Asia by the Dutch East India Company as slaves. Then you're also talking about the Indians who were brought here as indentured laborers by the British. So who's Black? What does that mean? Who are you talking about? And it's like, then you're able to obfuscate. And this is why I keep talking about this culture of dishonesty. And that's what it is. Why don't you want there to be a specific discussion of specific people's behavior and cultures? Why? I don't understand, right? So this is why I use the term Bantu, because I want to specifically talk about the Bantu people of sub-Saharan Africa. I don't want to talk about African people, because what is an African person? Who is African? Is it anyone who lives on the continent? Well, then, are you trying to tell me that everyone who lives on the continent behaves the same way, does the same things, has the same history, same culture, same potential destiny based on how they behave today? No, you have to be specific if you want to be, attempting to discuss social issues. And so this is why I use the term Bantu. And I just think it's so sad that this term would be seen as derogatory by a Black person. So basically you're saying that to be a Bantu is something derogatory. And the article says that it was seen as Bantu people were being described as primitive. Well, that's because they were. We were literally in the Iron Age when colonization was consolidated in this country. We were literally in the Iron Age. You can look up what it means to be in the Iron Age. It's a very primitive state. It's a pre-industrial and, in our case, a pre-literate state. Not all Iron Age societies were pre-literate, but ours was. And then when you say, oh, we're all Africans, then when someone says we were pre-literate, you can be like, oh, no, you're lying. Africans could read and write. Which ones? Which Africans could read and write? Which Africans were using the wheel? Which Africans were engaged in currency-based maritime trade? Yes, there were some, but it was not the Bantu of sub-Saharan Africa. And that's who I'm talking about. And that's why we have to specify, because when we look at, for example, right now in South Africa, we're having this issue of spaza shops and the horrific, tragic situation that's happening with children being poisoned. Before this incident, a few years ago, it became abundantly clear to our leaders that the reason why these spaza shop owners were being more successful in South Africa than the native South Africans was because these people were coming from civilizations where trade was a norm, was a cultural norm. These are people from the north, like the Central and East African belt, and also from West Africa. If you look at the history of these societies, going way back, they were trading peoples. Some of them were engaged in maritime trade, and so then you come down here where you have people whose economic activity was generally at the subsistence level. That's why these things can explain these things, and then they help you to also find solutions. So now instead of saying things like, oh, and I can't believe this actually happened one time. I think it was Lindy Zulu, if I'm not mistaken. If I am, I'm sorry, Miss Zulu. But, someone in the ANC leadership said, these foreigners must teach South Africans how to be entrepreneurs. I mean, why not, knowing that this problem exists, that your people do not have an entrepreneurial inclination, start to use the education system that you funnel So much money, almost R1 trillion a year, goes to education in this country. You funnel that much money into it, and yet you're not able to produce entrepreneurs. You literally could just go to Japan, not a European country, because you know how allergic y'all are to white people. Go to Japan, go to South Korea, go to Singapore, okay? And say, please give us your curriculum, your primary school, high school curriculum. Give it to us because we can see that y'all create entrepreneurial people. Give it to us. We will just implant it into our society. We won't even change it. And I can guarantee you in 15 years, you'll see a change in society. You'll see a more entrepreneurial inclined people, right? But that's not going to happen because we all know that the communists in the government are not interested in entrepreneurial people in this country, because entrepreneurs eventually become self-sufficient. They eventually access better education, and they eventually see right through the nonsense that is communism. And they can start to see that they actually can do a better job of running this country than these people, these cadres that are in our government running SOEs into the ground. SOEs that were already established, were already functioning, a going concern. They've run them into the ground. How many billions of rands have been plowed into these SOEs to fix the problems created by ANC cadres, communists who don't know anything about economic development? So I'm going to use the word Bantu because it's a term that defines a people. It was not intended to have a malicious connotation. Even if you've decided to make the connotation malicious, that's on you. But it doesn't mean anything malicious. It was there to define a people. And, you know, if you're going to be so obsessed with how evil white people are, I just want to leave you with some information from a document from the Human Sciences Research Council, authored by a Mr. Kanyane and a Mr. Houston, entitled The ANC's Policy Development and Challenges from the Liberation Struggle to the Holding of State Power. And in it, it just basically charts the entire history of the ANC and its policy standpoints from the time that it was known as the South African Native National Congress to today. And it talks about how when the South African Native National Congress was seeking to petition the British Crown over the impending Native Land Act that was eventually passed in 1913, they went to England armed with the English people's own philosophies of human rights and human equality, which had been on display during the abolition period against slavery, with white Christians like William Wilberforce and John Newton speaking out against the evil of slavery. Why? Why is it evil? Because Christ said all men are created in the image of God. And the Jews also, who don't believe in Christ necessarily, but they have that biblical teaching as well, that we're all made in the image of God, and therefore we all are deserving of human dignity. So they used that philosophy that the white people had taught their ancestors through the missionary schools, about we being in the image of God, to go and petition them to say, please intervene in the Union of South Africa about to pass this law, which is going to deprive us access to the land mass of South Africa. It wasn't a case of, oh, we don't have anyone to petition because, you know, these are just bloodthirsty dictators who would chop our heads off the moment we even open our mouths and protest against what they're trying to do here. No, they knew. And then the article even says that they knew that if they weren't able to get the Crown to intervene, and the Crown did say, look, this is a Union of South Africa issue, it would be very untoward of us to actually tell them what to do, because what's going on there, it's not just a British colony, it's actually a country which has been established, yes, through an Act of Westminster, but in partnership with the Afrikaners, who were not British subjects, who had declared themselves an independent people. You see, so there was a different relationship there. It wasn't just a straight colony like Canada or something, you know. But then it also says that the ANC, the South African Native National Congress members who went to England to petition them, knew that if they couldn't get the Crown to acquiesce to their request to intervene, they knew that they could put their case to the British people. Why? Because they remembered that it was the kindness of the British that led them to risk life and limb to come and teach them the gospel, to come and translate the gospel into their languages and use their own languages to teach them the word of God, and to help them with all sorts of developmental issues that were besetting their pre-literate, pre-industrial civilizations. You know, and then later on, the ANC itself also used another European document, the Atlantic Charter, European and American document, the Atlantic Charter, to petition for the ending of colonization. Another charter would say that all men are equal, people should be free, they shouldn't have to live under tyranny. I mean, I just wonder, like, would you have been able to go to the Ottoman Empire, for example, and use their morals to petition them to stop colonizing you? We can't even do that to our own African leaders. Here are people all over Africa suffering under the yoke of the tyranny of African leaders. And for some reason, there's no basis upon which we can appeal to their humanity to stop what they are doing to their own people. And yet the South African Native National Congress, knew that they could appeal to the morality of the Europeans, the British. Why can't we appeal to the morality of Black leaders oppressing own Black people? So I just want to say, guys, before you start getting all upset about a term that was literally used just to define a people, let's rather just stop pretending that we're victims of white people and be grateful for what white people have done for us, build on what they've given us so that we can make our continent a better place, and stop telling people like myself that we are some sort of white supremacists trying to pander to white people. No, we're doing this for our people, our Black people, to be free of the yoke of communism, which demands them to be victims so that they can be put into a position where they are completely dependent on the state for everything, because they are too much of a victim to do things for themselves. That demands them to see white people as a never-ending enemy. Not because it's going to help them develop, but because it's going to help them, because it's going to cause them to vote for leaders who pretend to be their saviors against these imaginary white enemies. So to the Bantu people of South Africa, of sub-Saharan Africa, and South Africa in particular, can we just stop it now? Let's get over this. There's nothing that we don't have that we can work with to build a society and a civilization that is economically self-sufficient, that values education, that values hard work, and that is looking towards a brighter future for ourselves and our children. Thank you very much.